Sylvia and me.
Sylvia and
Sylvia and me. Sylvia and
Sylvia. Sylvia and me.
I wanted divorce to get a full-throated defense. There's so many books that are like, oh, it was a necessary evil. No, it's great. Like, it's awesome and it's a wonderful tool. And if you need to use it, use it. No apologies. Get to that happy life because your happiness is not frivolous.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Beckerman, host of the podcast series Sylvia and Me. Conversations with inspiring, empowering women.
Hello, my name is Lyz Lenz. I'm an author and a journalist. My most recent book is called This American Ex-Wife. Welcome to Sylvia and Me.
Lyz, thank you so much for being with me here today. So this is great. And it's not just the American ex-wife, it's how I ended my marriage and started my life.
Yes.
For so many people, that is what happens. Before we get into this, I know you said you're, a journalist, you're an author. Let me give just a little bit more substance to your background. Let's see. Your writing has appeared in the HuffPost, Washington Post, Columbia Journalism Review, New York Times, Pacific Standard, and others. Your book, God Land, was published in 2019. Your second book, Belabored, in 2020. And your essays, All the Angry Women, was also included in the anthology, Not That Bad, edited by Roxanne Gray. You have a newsletter called Men Yell at Me, which is where I became familiar with you. And it's a newsletter that's both personal and political, and we'll get into that. But the great thing is that Alan Dershowitz called you fifth rate, Joe Biden called you a real sweetheart, and the Iowa GOP calls you crass and unprofessional.
That's right.
Words.
And listen, I am crass, but I'm very professional. So,
You've had 3 books published and so on and so forth. So,
yes.
We take a lot of things with just a grain of salt. As I said, they're only words. But you've done more than just words. You've actions. And we're going to talk about divorce and how it really comes about, and the stigma that to this day is still associated with it. I know I got divorced, as I said, back in, I left him in 2018. It took me 2 years to find a state to get divorced. And my children were young, like your children. They were 18 months and 4 years old. And back in the day, there was no one who wanted to associate with a divorcee with 2 small children. We're talking women in particular. It was just no. So you got married in 2005. You got divorced in 2017. And there are a couple of things that I absolutely want to talk about. And one of them is, what did he do that really pushed that button that you realized that it wasn't that something was going on, because he wasn't having an affair, which is much easier to be able to go ahead and say, there's a reason, there's a real reason. But I want you to tell us what happened, because to me, I'm going to use the word gaslighting, sort of. So tell us what pushed you over to realize that there was something going on.
Like all marriages, problems build, right? And they build and they build, and you try to sort through them. Our problems were the little things, right? And we had 2 little children, and he was working, and I was sacrificing my career to take care of these kids. And I was doing all the housework and all the cooking and all the cleaning. And I finally sold a book, and it's like a dream. It's a dream come true for a writer to be able to publish a book. And he was really not super supportive of it. He seemed really disappointed when I go away on these research trips. And I would like cook all this food, put it in the freezer, leave for my research trip, come back to a trashed house. And so in the middle of all of this, I'm trying to have my career, I'm trying to have my children, I'm trying to keep my marriage together. And in the middle of all of this, one day, I decide I am going to purge the house, right? My son he's my youngest, and he was just a couple years old at the time. And I was like, no more babies. I'm done, right? And I'm going to purge this house, and it's going to be a fresh start for all of us. And as I'm going through cleaning the house, and maybe you can identify this, like cleaning the house with two little kids, so you're kind of like never fully paying attention to any one thing, right? And I was getting ready to have a big garage sale, as we do in the Midwest. And I reached into the back of this crawl space, because the house is 100-year-old, moldy little house. And I reached in the back of this crawl space, see this box, which I think for years I had just assumed was like old wedding stuff. And my old grandma had given us some china that was terrible. And so I pulled out the box just to see what was inside. And inside, I found all these things that I thought I had lost over the course of not just my marriage, but the entire time we'd been together. For example, when we first started dating, and my ex is like, the strong silent type, I had jokingly bought this book, Conversation Starters, to like, read to him at our dates and just be like, if you had $1 million, what would you do with it? Just like silly things like that. I mean, we were in our 20s, so it was funny. And like
Funny
that
now.
funny now, yeah. And like, $1 million. Ooh, but like and it was just like mugs, like a mug. And I know it's an audio medium, but I'm gonna hold up a mug that says thanks for always liking my posts. This was a mug that was hidden away, right? Like it was like all these just like little things, like chambray shirts that I had bought because they're the perfect nursing shirt, because they hide stains, and you can button and unbutton and wear them with whatever. And it was just like all these things that I thought I had just lost and misplaced. And he had taken them and hidden them over the course of our many years together. And they were all just like hiding in this box. And seeing that was this like huge watershed moment for me, where it was like, I thought we were trying to save this marriage. I thought we had something, this foundation. And I realized, seeing that box, was like, he never liked me. Like all these little pieces of me, he was taking away and hiding them because he didn't like them. And we went back to therapy, and I brought up the box, and I was like, this is unacceptable. And the therapist, who we do not see, and I can just tell you all, is no longer practicing, but she was just like, hey, don't hide her stuff again. Like that was it. And she was like, why did you hide it? He was like, well, it's my house and I don't want those things in it. I'm like, my shirts, like, come on. And I was furious. And so he promised never to hide them again. And then after all this, we go through months of a terrible summer of intensive therapy while I'm trying to write a book and raise children. And then I come home from a work trip one day, and I see that I have this little sign, "Drink Up Witches," which I still own, was just missing. Like I had set it out because I thought it was funny. Again, I think a lot of dumb things are funny. And
Doesn't matter. They were yours.
exactly. I bought it from the Target dollar spot, like any good Midwestern mom, and had put it out, so thought it was funny, and it was just missing. And it was like in this moment of me trying to clean up the house for the house cleaner, seeing that this sign was missing, immediately knowing he had taken it and hidden it again, and having this moment where I felt like I was falling off a cliff, like vertigo in my dining room, where I was like, that's it. This is it. I can't live in a house where I cannot even put up a "Drink Up Witches" sign, right? Like this is over. And I think like it's, people have been reading that example. The book is not quite out yet, but I did release an audiobook excerpt, and everybody's like, that's so horrible. That's so awful. And it is, but it's also really common, to fight over who gets to, put stuff up and who gets to display their full selves. And but yeah, that was the moment that really broke me. And then the next day I asked for a divorce in therapy.
But you know, it's one thing to fight over things. That's a verbal thing. You're talking, you're
It's true.
arguing over what's going to be here, what's going to be there. But what happened to you is not that he said he doesn't want it. He actually told you that you must have misplaced it. And
Yes.
little by little was taking pieces of your life and putting them away.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
our whole marriage, I was, the writer, the absent-minded writer who like misplaced things and didn't know where anything was. And, I think it's really easy to gaslight women, right? Because we're told we're the crazy ones, we're told we're emotional, especially when we have young children. It's like, well, you just must be you're not in your right mind, and it's really easy for us to believe those lies. I think what's so much harder for women is to believe in ourselves and to trust our guts. And I think there were some moments where I had been like missing things. There were moments where I think I knew deep deep down inside, because I remember once looking for a chambray shirt and I was like, it's so hard to lose something that I wear all the time. And I was like, "Where is this?" I just remember asking him, like, "Have you seen it?" Blah, blah, blah. And him just sitting there. And there was that like little twinge. And in hindsight, right, those things are clearer. But in the moment when you want your relationship to work, I think it's really easy to be gaslit and to gaslight yourself.
well, when you got married in 2005. Um, Tell us this is, society, of course, since the 50s has said that women are supposed to get married. Nowadays, women are not so much torn into that bubble, that mirror of society of you go to work, and the only reason why you're going to work and you're getting an education is so you could meet the right person being the person who's going to take care of you, and you're going to take care of the home. And that's been back and forth, but so many fit into that bubble and that description. And so we get married, we have children, and for a lot of people, they it's not a question of giving up, because that's a choice. That is a choice, but sometimes we don't think that we have a choice because of what society has said what women are supposed to be. So when you got married, you were living I believe you weren't living in Iowa yet. That's where you
We
moved. But where were you
Yes.
living at that time?
Well, so I'd gone to college in Minnesota, and then I lived at his parents' house until we got married and moved to Iowa. So we got married in Minnesota and then immediately moved to Iowa for his job.
And you moved to Iowa for his job. It wasn't
Yep.
a question that it was a place where you wanted. And that's another aspect that you talk about. And it's true. Most of the time, things are led by where the husband is going to be working, even if the wife has a very good job. It's usually led by the concession is that the wife will move where the husband moves. Again, some of this is changing. There is a change going on out there, but it's not huge yet. This lean in and so on. A lot of it, and we'll talk about it, the pandemic and COVID kind of put a lot of people back. So when
Yeah.
you decided so you got married because I believe your sister had gotten married. Did you feel that this was a part that you needed to play, that this was what women are supposed to do, and that's get married and have children?
Well, I think it's not quite like, it's not like I was like, "Oh, I'm a conservative lady. This is what I have to do." Like I went to college and self-identified as a feminist. And I think like there's a temptation to see, women who get married very early on as like, "Oh, well, they're just like super conservative, but like I think there's this real strong strain in America that hasn't changed that says, that this is what a good life is. You go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, and this is what, and we still stigmatize single people, like at Christmas, how many times do you ask your single cousin, or maybe not you, but is your single cousin asked like, when are you gonna get married? When are you gonna get married? But nobody asks the couples, when are you gonna get divorced, right? So like which is probably far more likely. But so I really felt like this was the next step into adulthood. I had been dating this man for a while. He was good on paper, good. People met him. Everybody liked him, strong, good man, believed in country, believed in God, I'm not going to say his career because I'm trying to keep him as anonymous as possible, but like,
But on paper, he was
great career, good family, wonderful family, still love his family, and it was just like that this is good, right? And you say, this is a good man, this is a good life. And I threw myself headlong into it because I'm a type A girl, right? I want to do the right things and be the right kind of person. And this just made sense, and it made sense to all the people around me. There was no one around me saying like, this is bad, don't do it. Everybody was like, yeah, he's a great guy, you are, you're checking off all the right boxes. And so getting married just really seemed to make sense. And I think it still makes sense for a lot of people, right? Because we say like, oh, I don't want to be alone, or, again, who's going to take care of me? How am I going to do all this stuff? And then society makes it so like, I read something recently that like single women pay more in taxes than married couples, right? Like everything in our society, like
yes.
not healthcare, taxes, home ownership, it all shoves you into these marriages. And, part of the project of my book is to say, we need to rethink that.
Well, and I've had a number of guests on a number of women that I've had conversations with. There are over 1,000 benefits that marrieds get over unmarrieds.
Yes.
So that we won't get into, but what I do want to, one of the things that you just said is the definition that we think of in this society is a good life is being married, having a home, having children, having a good husband, and that is usually the definition of a good life. And no, at Christmas time, I'm not asked by my relatives because we do celebrate Hanukkah, but I do go.
There you go.
But any family, it used to be years ago, you always knew when, the question was, when were you going to get married? Now I want to fast forward a little, you're 12 years, and it's 2017. You've realized that you have not gone insane, that you did not misplace all these things. And basically what was happening was that you were not being respected. Your life was not being made a part of the life of your family. And really, there was just such a lack of respect for what you treasured. And I don't mean treasured like in, finding treasure, just little things, because we don't have to. I mean, my son loved the little Matchbox cars.
Yes.
And, if his brother would take them away, that would be horrible. So it's the little things in life.
Yeah.
Whether it's an old stuffed animal that we had when we were 2 and we're in our 60s or 70s or whatever, it doesn't make a difference. How did you go about realizing, yes, it was a Monday, you decided in your therapy, you announced you wanted to get a divorce. How did that play out in what you were thinking? You had the good life, you realized it wasn't a great life. Now you want to take your life back again.
I didn't have, so we'd been married for so long. I asked for divorce in 2017. It wasn't finalized until 2018, but I'd met him in high school, right? And we started dating in college. We'd been together for so long. We'd been trying to make it work for so long. And I remember a very dear friend of mine, who's still my very dear friend, had said to me when I was going through all of this, she was like, you know, I'm saying things. I'm like, well, he doesn't, he's not physically abusive. He hasn't cheated. I'm trying so hard to make this work. And she was like, your life is not a game of chicken. You don't have to wait for him to agree, that this is bad enough for you to leave. She's like, you can just go. She's like, I'm your friend. I love you and I want you to be happy. And nobody had ever said that to me. Nobody had ever said, I want you to be happy. I think we think that like women's happiness is frivolous. And so I just remember in that moment when I snapped and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't have the rest of my life be fighting to put up a little drink up witches sign, right? Like imagine telling your small son he can't have Matchbox cars in the house, right? It's just like, it's so silly, but it's also deeply personal. And I just remember snapping and saying, I can't do this anymore. And I have so many wonderful friends and a very supportive group of friends. And I remember going and posting in a little Facebook group of friends that I had and being like, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. What do I do next? And immediately the women who had been there before were like, you get a new therapist because your therapist sucks. You get a new therapist and you get a lawyer. And I didn't have access to our shared finances because, like so many couples, we'd merged our money. And like so many women who give up career to raise the children, I hadn't been making the majority of the money, so I didn't have access. I just had access to a little account where I had my monthly money, and that was it. And so I mean, it was like full of practical advice. I set up a separate bank account and I emailed all the editors I worked for and was like, do you guys have I just need to make some money. Do you have any marketing jobs, anything? And everybody was so helpful. And so I started, late at night, started writing marketing copy for like, Christmas and holiday packages, because that was around the season that it was. I started ghostwriting op-eds, funneling all this money into there. I got a lawyer. I got a new therapist. And it was really, I felt like I was making it up day by day, because I come from like a big family where my parents are still together. I had never seen this done before and I didn't know what I was doing. And also we live in a culture that's like single motherhood. It's so bad. It's so horrible. You're gonna be tired and wish you had a man around to hammer nails into the wall or what the hell ever, and it's just like, but I was so miserable. I was like, well, I know I can't do this anymore. So I have to get out. And I wasn't really thinking a lot in advance. I was just taking it step by step by step. And I remember finally getting to the lawyer's office and her saying, make a picture yourself, right? Like picture yourself on the other side. And that's what you're going to get to. And she's like, and you have to keep that picture of yourself in your mind. And, so I had like just a picture of myself. And it's very silly, but like just sitting on a little green couch in a sunlit living room, drinking coffee and reading a book with all my stuff around me. And that was the picture I held on to. And day by day, throughout the next year, I finally got there.
But
But
it's not a silly picture. It's your picture.
it is, and it's
Your
beautiful.
picture.
It is and I have a little green couch and I have a sunlit living room and I have plants and I have stupid little signs on my wall and wallpaper. Love wallpaper. But it's not, you're right. It's not stupid. It's happiness and it's a good life. And I think we need to, and that's why I wanted to write this book, because I wanted to say, like, I wanted divorce to get a full-throated defense. There's so many books that are like, oh, it was a necessary evil. No, it's great. Like, it's awesome and it's a wonderful tool. And if you need to use it, use it. No apologies. Get to that happy life, because your happiness is not frivolous.
It's not frivolous. And the thing is, if you're being suppressed and you're being pushed down without even knowing it, um, the struggle in your own mind to make that decision, and it's freeing. It's
It
a
is.
new life. It's a new chapter. It's a new door that you open up. Children know. Anyone who says they're doing it, they're staying together for the children, those children know from a very young age that there's tension, and then they
Oh,
grow up with it, and then they don't know how their relationships are supposed to go, and it's even more detrimental to older children.
yes. And research, and so people, this is another thing, I have a chapter about this in the book, but like people keep saying, oh, it's so bad for the kids. But our research is so biased. It is so biased that a lot of the research on outcomes for kids only focuses on like the first year post-divorce or first 2 years. We're not looking 5 to 10 years down the road. And that research shows that when kids have happy parents, they have a happy life, and it doesn't matter what kind of household situation they're in. If the bad outcome for children is being in poverty, and it's poverty that is really, really bad for children, and divorce so often, because of the way we structure our society, results in women being very poor, because of the pay gap, right? Because of a lack of healthcare, because of unaffordable childcare. But if children can be in a place of peace and happiness and see their parents happy, that is so much better. Yeah. So get yourself down off that cross. You're not sacrificing yourself for your children if you think you're going to be miserable for the next 10 years. To what? To prove what to your children? That marriage is misery? And like, how are they gonna listen? My son, my kids go to school in Iowa, which is Iowa, it's red state. And they did this, my son's class did this like project, and I don't even know what it was. And of course, don't worry, I sent the teacher an angry email. But they did this thing where it was like mom jobs and dad jobs. And it was like the moms clean, the dads mow the lawn. And my little sweet son was like furious. He was furious in class, because he was like, and I raised my hand and I said, well, these are all the things. He has a little lisp. He's like, these are all the things that my mom does too. And we need to talk about how hard all the women work, and that we don't respect their work. And I was like, yes.
How old is he?
He's 10. He's
There
perfect.
you go.
But just like we don't, and I remember, when I was married, all the labor my children didn't see, because I was working so hard to hide it from them. I was working so hard to hide my misery. And I think it's just really important for kids to see us be happy, full humans, and see all the labor that we do.
Well, hiding the labor, I mean, come on. Not good, but it's good that he knows now, and kudos to your son. What gives me a lot of hope is seeing a lot of young marrieds now in their 30s. And I know the book and the movie Fair Play, and the fact that so many couples, parts of families, the husband says he does stuff, but it's really the mom, the wife, who reminds him. What I am so encouraged about in this particular time is seeing the equality that's going on. Total equality, not having to remind the father or the husband to go do it, but the fact that they're actually doing things together. There's no such thing as a reminder that, oh, the garbage has to be taken out, or that it's a job. It's a together thing. And I've seen that in so many young marrieds, specifically in their 30s with young children. So there is a lot of hope as far as I'm concerned, because believe me, I understand the inequality And it was totally brought out again, and probably more so than ever before during the pandemic, when the bulk of moms and dads did stay home because, offices were closed, businesses were closed. But the inequality and the lack of daycare and the lack of childcare really fell the majority on the women.
Yes.
And that goes without saying. And we could have a lot of polls and talk to people, but we know that that is so.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, because as we get back to whatever normality may in our lives happen or not happen, that lack of childcare specifically is so detrimental to working women, to moms, to single moms. No matter where we go with it, that is a huge, absolutely huge as far as I'm concerned. What else would you like to point out? I know that we live in a time where divorce, especially in today's day and age, is usually started by women, which, as we've talked, we can understand why so many women are starting to realize that it's not the stigma that we grew up with, that I grew up with. It definitely is not. But there still is that stigma.
There is, there really, really is. And I still run headlong into it so often. And it's not just a conservative red state thing, right? It's everywhere. And so, one of the reasons I felt like it was important to write this book was to say, yes, like relationships can be hard and also fulfilling, but also the system of marriage as it is designed, like the political system of marriage, like we talked about, and as I'm sure your listeners full well know, like how we decide our taxes, how we decide healthcare, like how we decide all these things, that is a political system. And that is we have built an infrastructure in our society that is based upon the unpaid labor of women. So having a good relationship in that inherently unequal system is really, really hard. And it is hard to bootstrap inequality in an unequal America. And we have, and it's important to look at our society. And I know everybody's like, well, my marriage is different. It's not different. Like you're still trapped in this unequal world. And it's like, look at the world. Like our reproductive rights are getting taken away. States all across America are trying to make divorce harder. And look, first of all, it is easier for a 16-year-old in America to get married than it is for a 42-year-old to get divorced. Like this is not, we don't need to make divorce harder than it is, but it's all about reducing women's choices. But one of the most surprising statistics I found when I was researching this book was like, there is undeniable evidence that in countries that have liberal divorce laws, where it's easy to get divorced, relationships last longer. Actually, kids are more likely to stay in school, women earn more, and rates of domestic violence decrease. So when you give women choices, when they feel free and when they feel empowered by the laws in their state, life gets better for everyone. And that's what I wanted to say. It's like, we need to break this stigma. And I think the stigma exists is because everybody's afraid of a liberated woman, right? Like a woman who's like, hey, I actually don't need your marriage. I don't need this kind of a life. Everybody gets really nervous. Like, oh, what's she gonna do? Be single forever? Hell yeah. Yes. Yes, I'll live in the woods with my dogs. It sounds great, but like that's a really difficult concept because we just don't like a liberated woman. And that's why our society seems to be regressing at the moment to pull rights away from women, but I think it's important that we realize that our marriages operate in a political system, and we need to be advocating for change, and not just change politically, but change in our own lives. And you deserve to look at your partner and say, be equal or I'm out, right? Like, and my book is arguing it's okay to say that, because if it breaks, and I think good relationships, and I was just talking about this with a friend the other day, she was like, I said to my husband, he was like, oh, everything is equal. And she was like, no, it's not. And they sat down with the fair play deck. If you know the fair
Yeah.
play cards where you lay out the labor, and she showed him, and he's a great guy, well-meaning man, wonderful father, had no clue that the work she was doing. And she said, look at this. And she's like, we need to change it. And also now I have this book, This American Ex-Wife. So get your crap together, because I want this to work, but it can't work if we're not both working at it. And I do think a lot of our like rhetoric about marriage, like it's hard work. I'm always like, hard work for who? Because it's a woman always doing the work. It's a woman buying the fair play deck. It's a woman reading Eve Rodsky, right? It's the women. And so I just really want to empower, and a lot of men love to email me and be like, I cook. And I'm like, well, great. Who does the grocery shopping and the meal planning? Like, step up. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. Your life can be great no matter what. You don't need to have a marriage to have a good life.
Well, that's it. You don't need a marriage to have a good life.
No.
Having a good life in a marriage that you feel equal is also good. So we're not saying everyone should get divorced.
Well,
Well, no, the thing is that you need to know there are choices, and you need to know that you do not have to live in
yes.
in an environment where you're being suppressed. And women need to get smarter about their finances, about
Yes.
where they stand in the relationship, about what they're doing and what they want. Because
Exactly.
once that takes place, the empowerment and the emboldenment happens. And then you can have the strength to, if you need to and you want to then get out of a relationship that is pushing you down, and you can't really have a life. And what do you do when the children are grown? All of
Exactly.
a sudden, you're out there on a rowboat in the middle of an ocean without an oar. I mean, it's just, it's something we need to take the stigma away. We need to have more people understand what equality is, and the fact that we don't need to be suppressed.
Yeah,
Or do we
exactly.
need to not have any part of our life be shown in our life? So, Lyz, you said something after you got divorced about cooking. What was it?
Well, about cooking. Well, I said, now that I am divorced, I will never cook for a man again. Because when I was married, and I love to cook, by the way. I'm a very good cook. But I grew up the second oldest of 8 kids. I went to college, lived with a bunch of women. Then I was an RA. I've always been cooking and caring. And then I, had children of my own. And so I've always been cooking and caring for people. And there was this moment, I think, in my marriage where I suddenly realized that the thing that I had done, cooking, had no longer had any joy. It felt so compulsory. And when I started asking my now ex, I was like, hey, I'm struggling. I have 2 really small children. It's hard to cook, because also that's the time when babies get fussy, and my little son, when he was a baby, he was so fussy. He always just wanted to be on me, right? And like, So I'm just like, I can't even boil water without a baby screaming. Can we just, and there was no break, right? Like maybe he'd bring home fried chicken one night or something, but then
Oh,
he'd forget. And then, and I have to be constantly asking. And then when I got to the other side, and I did not expect single motherhood to be the joy that it is, but it's really great because it's so much more fun to parent when you're happy than when you're unhappy. And I have less labor actually, and studies show that single mothers, even when they have full custody of their children, still have more free time and more time to sleep than their married counterparts. So I got to this other side, and I'm on the other side, and I'm realizing I don't have to cook dinner every night. We can just have like leftovers. We got yogurt. We can just like I do something called, my kids call it a snack plate, or the snack dinner, where I just like, it's just like throw cheese cubes and fruit and pepperoni slices. It's like kid
an appetizer
charcuterie.
plate.
Yeah. Toddler tapas, whatever you want to call it. And it was just like, we can just eat that. And it's just so easy and simple. And I realized that once I got out from under all those expectations, how much better and freer my life would become. And and yeah, and now like this cooking thing is not compulsory. And it's so funny because I do date, and I am dating men. It's a tragedy of my life, but it happens. And they're so funny because this article that I wrote about how I would not cook for a man again is a little bit viral and a little bit notorious. And so sometimes I'll date men and they'll be like, "Oh, well, are you never gonna cook for me?" And I'll be like, "No." Like, no. I don't know. Are you like, but it is like, it's so funny, like how nervous that makes people. And I just think that like we still live in a gendered expectation society, because if we didn't, that wouldn't make people nervous. Like imagine a man being like, "I don't cook dinner." And you're like, "Yeah, join the club," right? Like of men who don't cook. Like, okay. But a woman doing that, people are like, "How do your children eat? How do you eat? Well, how will you ever have a good relationship?" It's like, I don't know. I guess I'll figure it out. Like,
Liz, where can people find out more about you?
well, I do have a website, lyzlenz.com, lyzlenz.com. That's a link to my newsletter, link to all my books, some of my articles, not all of my articles. But you can also, I have the newsletter Men Yell at Me, which is lyz.substack.com. And I'm on, I guess it's X now, as LYZL, and then Instagram as Lyz Lenz. So you can find
People
me
can
on all
find
those
you.
places. Yeah, I'm very online. You can find me.
And the book is This American Ex-Wife: How I Ended My Marriage and Started My Life. Liz, thank you so much for being with me here today.
Thank you.
You can find us on all of your popular podcast platforms. And of course, our website, sylviaandme.com. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, stay tuned.